Hello interwebs and welcome to my channel. For today's video, I want to do a follow-up discussion on a video that I did last week, a rather contentious video that I did last week, surrounding the character of Micheal Burnham, the lead character of Star Trek Discovery. And the reason I want to have this follow-up discussion is, when I looked out at the discourse surrounding that video and the conversations that were happening around that video, which, by the way, I thought were actually very good faith, very nuanced, very respectful, I was actually really pleased with how well the conversations were going, given how contentious that video could have gotten, and that topic generally is the discussion of race and identity within the character of Micheal Burnham, within the Star Trek franchise, and within science fiction as a whole. That is a topic that is very contentious, and I was rather pleased with how a lot of people were being very respectful on the whole in that discussion, even when they were disagreeing with me. But when I looked out into the discussion, even within people who were doing good faith, nuanced, thoughtful arguments, I still felt that there was a part of the video that perhaps I did not make as clear as I could have, given how crucial this element of the discussion is. And I feel like it's worth bringing up again and highlighting and doing a sort of deeper dive on this specific part of that discussion, because it not only applies to the character of Micheal Burnham, but to how we talk about any character of typically underrepresented minorities and racial groups within, pop culture, but specifically science fiction and sort of big budget Hollywood franchises that have existed for a really long time, like Star Trek, Star Wars, take your pick, Marvel, DC Comics, things like that. Characters that we all love, or franchises that we all have a lot of investment in and care for, things like that, or genres that we have a lot of care and love for. And that is specifically that I feel like a lot of people are hesitant to want to discuss characters of minority groups within the context of them being part of a minority group. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's focus in on Micheal Burnham, but then I'll sort of extrapolate it out to other characters within other franchises and pop culture in general. When we look at Micheal Burnham, she is a character who is incredibly divisive within the Star Trek fandom. She's a character that people either really love or really hate. And because she is a character who is a black woman, she is black, she is a woman, she is a black woman, which are all three intersecting identities. A lot of people frame the discussion of, like, if you hate her, if you think she's a bad character, oh, you must be racist, you must hate her because she's a black woman. And then other people from the other side feel like, oh, they can't critique this character at all, because if they do critique her, they will be seen as racist or misogynist or sexist or things like that. And so it becomes a sort of thing of this sort of hyperbolic, you're either love or hater, and you're awful or a great person, or, you sort of see these two sides of the thing. And it eliminates a lot of the discussion around her as a character and a lot of the problems that people have around her as a character, namely things like, sometimes she disobeys orders, or she's too centered within the story and narrative of Star Trek, which is typically an ensemble show. These are, specific criticisms of the character that a lot of people want to have, but kind of want to have outside of these sort of hyperbolicized narratives. And so when I looked at the comments surrounding the video that I was making, which was about the standards that are placed on her as a character because she is a black woman, a lot of people were saying, well, like, look, I hear what you're saying. I hear that she's, got standards placed on her because she is a black woman, but I have problems with her that have nothing to do with her race, that are regardless of what her race. I even have people say, like, I don't see color, and, I dislike Micheal Burnham, or I love Micheal Burnham, but it has nothing to do with the fact that she is a black woman. And I understand that impetus. I understand that desire to not want to over-focus on her race, because we live in a society today where things like race, where talking about the black community, or really any minority community at all, is heated, is contentious, is hard to have sometimes. It sometimes makes people uncomfortable, especially people who are not part of those communities. It's even hard for me. I am not black, and it took a lot of time for me to be comfortable being like, to even say the word black in a video, to have discussions around the black community and black characters within the context of them being black. And so I understand why people are saying, like, look, I just want to criticize this character and have a problem with her character and how she's written and discussed without having to bring in all that baggage. The issue is you can't. You can't do that. And I'm not saying like you're wrong or bad for feeling that impulse, for feeling the impulse to not want to talk about her within the context of her race. I understand it. I feel it. I felt it myself. The thing is, she is a black woman. She is a black character. She is a woman. That's who she is. That's the type of person that she is within the world and the context of the show Star Trek. There is no way to discuss her as a character without acknowledging the fact that she is a black woman. And I'm not saying that that has to be a wholly negative or bad thing. It's just a thing that is. She is a black woman. And we need to not erase that fact within these discussions when we talk about her as a character. We can't just blank slate her and talk about her as if she's without the context of her own identity. Now, let me be explicitly clear here. I'm not saying that you can't talk about her at all without mentioning that she's black or that you should essentialize her blackness. But you can also not erase the fact that she is a black woman when you discuss her as a character. You kind of have to do both. You have to talk about her as a black woman, but also not frame everything about the character as if she's a black woman. But you can't ignore it either. Say it with me. Nuance is the thing. You don't have to frame things as it has to be this way or that way. We as humans want to say that it has to be this way or it has to be that way. You have to talk about her being black or you can't talk about it at all. But you can do both. It's important to do both. You know, we tend to see characters like Kirk, Picard, or any of the numerous straight white male characters within any franchise, you know, Superman, Batman, just sort of name things from other franchises, Luke Skywalker. We sort of feel like we can talk about those characters without the context of them being straight white cisgender dudes. But the thing is, we do talk about them within the context of those identities. We just don't explicitly state it, but it is part of it. But we talk about Luke Skywalker being a straight guy that wants to date Leia. Or he has, maybe I misspoke, he has, wants to date other characters like Mara Jade. Ooh, that's gonna get, that's a whole other thing. Never mind, bad example. That's like Superman who wants to date like Lois Lane. He's a straight white dude who wants to date Lois Lane. And he doesn't have to deal with like the issue of being a biracial couple with Lois Lane or the context of that. So that is part of his character. We just don't explicitly state it. And so this topic sometimes gets a little bit muddied within Star Trek specifically because Star Trek is ostensibly a show that, you know, is supposed to be set in this time where we've moved beyond race, where race does not matter anymore, and humanity has moved beyond the need to worry about its own multi-ethnic identity, and it's not a big issue for anybody anymore. But the very fact that we have to state that is a selling point of the show of Star Trek means that we are talking about race explicitly, that it is an important part of Star Trek to talk about race. But that does also apply to other franchises, but within Star Trek, that is an important part of it. To sort of hone back in and to use a different character on this fact, think about, the character of Sisko. He was a black man. And there were many times within Star Trek that the fact that he was a black man played an important role in his development as a character. There were many scenes within that show that brought that up. For example, I'm thinking of Far Beyond the Stars, where, he traveled back in time and turned out to be, the writer who wrote all of Star Trek and Deep Space Nine, and that was sort of a big racial topic episodes, but it even came up within the context of the future world of Star Trek. There was an episode, Bada Bing, Bada Boom, where Sisko brings up the fact that he doesn't like to go to historical events on the holodeck because he's a black man, and on the holodeck, you wouldn't necessarily see black men being treated okay within those contexts.
Las Vegas, 1962, that's my problem. In 1962, black people weren't very welcome there.
Great point that the show brought up because Sisko was a black man. The point being that I'm making here is, as much as we would like to sort of see something like Star Trek as existing outside of the ability to talk about race and identity, that it's sort of beyond that. It is a show that is written and made by human society today. Star Trek, the original series, was reflective of the 60s of America when it was made. Same thing with Next Generation in the 80s, DS9 in the 90s, Voyager in the 90s and 2000, Enterprise in the 2000s as well, and Star Trek Discovery in the 21st century. These shows are made within the context of their world, and so even if the show does not explicitly acknowledge that Micheal Burnham's a black woman, we have to talk about her within that context of she is a black woman. It's important to do that. It's important to talk about these standards that are placed on her character because she is a black woman. This isn't to say that you are bad for criticizing her character. This isn't saying you are bad for saying, I have problems with her writing. This is just to say it is important for you to acknowledge that there are those standards placed on her character because she is a black woman, and that you are aware of them when you are making your criticisms of her. This isn't to like have to couch every single statement you make about her in those terms, but it's something that you need to be aware of when you discuss her, because it's part of who she is. Again, both in a good and a bad way. Star Trek discusses infinite diversity and infinite combinations. It's not about the same person, the same identity copied and pasted over and over again. The important part of infinite diversity and infinite combinations is that different identities bring something different to the table, and it's important to discuss what those identities bring specifically. It is just as much a disservice to her character to ignore the fact that she is a black woman or to not understand the context that she sits in as a black woman as it is to focus exclusively on the fact that she is a black woman. It is just as much a disservice either way. It is not a bad thing to acknowledge that she faces double standards, different standards as a black woman, as a black character within the show. It's important that you acknowledge it. It doesn't mean to erase all of your discussions of her. It doesn't mean to eliminate your discussions of her. In fact, it should just be part of your discussions of her as a character, just as much as you would say, I enjoyed this movie because this, guy character was having a romance plot with this woman. You're talking about that character because he's a straight dude, and that context is important to the movie that you're watching, to the story that's being told. The same thing with Micheal Burnham. How we process her as a character, how she is written as a character by the writers is all colored by the fact that she is a black woman, both within the narrative, and within how she's chosen to be performed by Sonequa Martin Green, the actress. And it should be noted that I've been framing most of this discussion around the criticisms of Micheal Burnham, saying that we should not ignore her blackness around criticisms of the character, but it's also important that we recognize the other side of it too, the inspiration that she can have as a character who is black, how her blackness is an inspiration to many. There are so many young black girls who now get to see themselves as a captain of a live-action Star Trek show, and that's so awesome. She's also an inspiration to me and many other women for being an awesome woman. But it's also important that we don't define her inspiration solely to her blackness. Burnham isn't solely an inspiration because she is black or because she's a woman, but because of the character that she is. But her blackness is a part of that character and part of the story of who she is too. Again, we can't ignore nor hyper-focus on her identity, but just take her identity as a black woman as a singular part of the totality that is her character, the good and the bad of that. And I know I said this early in the video, but I want to make this point clear. If you get nothing else from this video, then this is the point that I want you to know. It is just as much a disservice to her character to ignore the fact that she is a black woman within your criticisms of her, or your discussions of her, or your enjoyment of her as a character, as it is to only frame your enjoyment of this character, or your hatred of this character, or your criticisms of this character on the fact that she is a black woman. You must acknowledge the fact that she is a black woman, but that does not mean that you are a bad person or wrong or can't say anything about her character because of that fact. It's just part of who she is. And that applies to every single character in fiction, in any work of art or any work of fiction. As I said, infinite diversity and infinite combinations means acknowledging the unique perspectives that people come from. It's acknowledging the unique perspectives that a black woman brings to the table, that a black woman brings to the story. It's not a good thing that black women have faced particular oppression or struggles or challenges because they are black women. I wish that they hadn't had to experience those specific things, just as I wish I didn't have to experience specific things, specific struggles because I'm a trans woman. But they are struggles that I have as a trans woman. There are struggles that black women have for being black women, and we should acknowledge them, not ignore them, and we should acknowledge them and find joy in what that experience and that perspective brings to the table. Not wipe it away within our discussions of her. I totally get the impetus to say, I don't see color. I just want to criticize her character. That's fine. You can have problems with her character, but just understand that those criticisms are bouncing off of or influenced by or react to or maybe informed by or maybe caused by the fact that she is a black woman or the context of a black woman surrounds them. Because it does. Because that's the time period in which he's written, where Black Lives Matter is a huge movement in the United States today. That it's just a big thing to talk about. And so we need to have these discussions around her character, because that's the context within the world that she is being written in by the writers of the show Star Trek Discovery, and the audience that is watching that show is being influenced by that and the world around us. I don't sit in a bubble all day waiting to watch Star Trek Discovery come out and be like, well, let me criticize this now, having no idea what's going on in the world right now. I'm just going to view it as what it is. Like, no, the show sits in a context. The show sits within our world. And so it's important to acknowledge that. And I think that that's just really important to say, because I feel like our impetus is to just try to ignore that because we want to be critics that see things outside of the world. You can't. And that's fine. That's okay. That is actually part of Star Trek's message of infinite diversity and combinations, to acknowledge that. But what do you think? Do you disagree with me? I'd love to hear all your thoughts down in the comments below. Like I said, I was really enjoying the fact that there were really nuanced and thoughtful discussions going on, regardless if people disagree with me. And in fact, I like it when people disagree with me, because it leads to more interesting conversations like this. So I hope that continues. Thank you so much for watching this channel. Don't forget to subscribe. I also have a Patreon. But beyond all of that, I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper. Thank you so much to all of my patrons who are helping me achieve my dream of doing this full time. And especially a thank you to Catherine Lambeth, Miranda Janelle, Ashley Allen Bokikio, Eli Berg-Moss, Ashlyn Solstice, Michael D., Greg Gillum, Stephen Kleinard, Chamomile T., Ulysses the Pagan, Randy Thompson, Boyd and Mary Beth Earl, Wellington Marcus, Stephen Schuhart, Wayne Twitchell, Roar, Ish the Mad, Dominic Noble, Buttoneer, John Steele, Michael Beam, Jedi Indiana Jones, William Stewart, Gavin Robinson, Nathan Olson, BBD, Amanda Ronye Adanya, The Sir Spence, Jason Knott, Hannah F., Andrew Jorgensen, Maeve, Jasmine, Skylar Gray, Sean Piper, Andrew K., Bree Beecher, Subraxis, Jane Packard and Chloe Dollar, Nathan Steele, Tiffany Danger, Mari Neckar, Wendizzle Bizzle, Bush, W. Randy Eady, Mark the Edge, Piston Twisted Garage, Geek Filter, Gretchen Badger, Polly Mina, Jean Mithun, Sarah Bystam, Lysa, Din, Jacob Tovar, Celestial Dawn, Lily, Andrew Lamoureux, Raina C., Zone 1 Librarian, Michael Hardy, Corey Honkanen, and Vale Dunn. Thank you. You are all beautiful, beautiful people. Nico Martin Green, the actress,